Welcome to a day trip in Wisconsin. Today we're here at Oso Brewing in Plover, Wisconsin. We're going to talk to Marc, and Marc's going to give us a little history on microbrewing, a little bit about their company, and the types of beer that they make. So stay tuned.
Every year, 40% of all food in the U.S. never gets eaten.
40%. That's almost half the food we produce.
Food waste is a serious problem. It impacts all of us.
And it's expensive. Your family is throwing $1,500 a year in the trash.
We're working hard to put food waste on the chopping block.
And you can do the same at home.
Learn how to cook it, store it, and share it.
Just don't waste it.
Go to savethefood.com.
Welcome back. Today here we're with Marc here at Oso Brewing. Marc, can you give us a little information, a little insight how it became and what your involvement here is?
Sure, absolutely. So I'm the president and owner here, founder, and we started Oso 10 years ago. So we just celebrated our 10-year anniversary, and it started as crazy homebrewers that kind of got bit by the bug. And I'm an entrepreneur in spirit. So this is our second location, and we're actually going to be building a brand new location next year. So it just keeps growing and growing and growing. Our first year we did like 350 barrels of production. This year we were pretty close to 7,000 barrels of production. So it's growing fast. It's a competitive market right now.
How did you get started in this here? I mean, it's just not that just one day, I'm just going to start making beer, and just.
So when I was in college, my neighbor was the president of the which was once called the Focal Point Brew Club, and he introduced me to a craft beer I'd never had. I just drank Budweiser at the time, and that was my first taste of something kind of special in that. So then I said, well, how do I make this? And so he got me going on that, and my background is engineering, so the science behind the beer and that was something that really kind of grabbed me, and it's still grabbing me today. So
right,
I know I'm in the right thing.
It's something you just can't do in your kitchen and make all this. What was the transition from doing something small scale to doing something a little bit more production wise? Yeah,
so I mean, we did actually start making it on the stove at home, and then when you make the transition, doing like 5 gallons at a time, now we do 3,000 gallons at a time. So that's quite a transition, but really kind of making the move into dairy equipment. So back when we started 10 years ago, there's a lot of access to dairy equipment. We're central Wisconsin, right. There's a lot of stuff you can get, and then we just kind of started growing from there, kind of repurposing old dairy stuff, and then once we had enough money, we'd actually get into honest to goodness brewing stuff. So
okay, and then with that, how from when you started it from in your home, I'm sure that takes a lot more longer time than what you can do in a professional setup. Is that kind of true, or is the timeline still kind of like this?
Timeline's pretty similar. The toughest part, I think, was actually you know how to brew, but you don't understand the other parts of the business. So you don't understand the distribution part of it, the sales and marketing. These are all tough things. Now you have a government entity that you deal with on top of it. At a Fed level and a state level, the permitting, different things that it takes. Now we have 16 full-time employees. That's something that that you maybe don't think when you first start that you're going to end up that big. And obviously we have more on the way. So those were probably the biggest challenges. Just kind of learning. Every day it's learning here.
Yeah.
Even after 10 years.
So it's for being quite local. You're really family driven as well.
Absolutely. My wife is my business partner also, and then both my sons work in the business, and so it's definitely a family affair, small business. we do, like I mentioned, about 7,000 barrels, but to put it into perspective, New Glarus does like 250,000 barrels, Point does about over 150,000 barrels, so we're pretty small. The product that we make is more niche-y, kind of ultra crafty. It's really consumer driven, and we do a lot of barrel aging. Our biggest niche that we've been getting into lately is sour beers. I think if you'd ask other brewers throughout the state, like who's the sour brewery, Oso is that sour brewery. So that's something we've really embraced.
Right. Mm-hmm. With that being said, is there a lot of care that goes into making specialty brews? I mean, just not like your average beer that you just go into a regular convenience store and get, versus something that's got some real flavor to it, or something that's really unique.
Yeah.
I mean,
so the biggest thing is that there's a lot of creativity that goes into it. So there's like the sky's the limit on the amount of ingredients, the things that you could put in, how big the beer is, speaking in terms of how thick it is or how much alcohol it has. So there's a lot. It's very artisan. So if you're just making just a regular light beer, that's kind of the run-of-the-mill thing. We try to go into a higher tier and make something that is a little more upper echelon, a little more crafty, and so these beers take longer also because of the size of the beer, or the gravity of the beer. Like some of the barrel aged wood cask barrel aged beers that we do, they're 2 years, before they're kicked out on the other end. So
that's quite a while. The way I mean, you always see like whiskeys and stuff like that. They age for 10, 20 years in a barrel before you get to try it. It's quite something. You got to wait that long to get that kind of flavor, but I'm sure it's well worth it.
Yep.
And that's probably something that people really enjoy. That's
the stuff that produces lines out the front of the door when you do a release. Those sort of things. So you've got to have your staples of beers that are your core beers that are paying the bills, and then these other beers. They're also they're good revenue generators, but they're you show off a little bit with those. Those are our fun ones. Right. Those keep us motivated, keep us going.
Okay. Yeah. What for some that don't know, what is a microbrew? What makes it different than your standard, high production facilities, that is a well-known name brand across the whole country? What's the difference between all that?
I think it's made with passion. That's probably the first ingredient that has to be in it to be considered a craft microbrew. Put it into perspective, Miller Coors down in Milwaukee, I think I heard a number that they produce about 26,000 barrels in a day.
Jeez.
So I can't even imagine what that looks like. I can't even wrap my head around how fast those lines go. And we're pretty good here. I mean, we produce, when we do our packaging, we package 150 cases an hour. For us, that's pretty good. Right. But it's all relative to your size. So I think it's more of a team effort. So when we come up with beers and ideas, it's a team thing. I might be the owner and top guy here, but at the end of the day, everybody's input comes into these beers, and I've been trumped before. We rule by a democratic process here, right. Certainly.
So with the microbrewery, when you have someone like the bigger competition or the company that puts out a lot, how is that product different? Is it more better tasting, or the care that goes into it and the ingredients more better than your
just the
run-of-the-mill stuff? I mean, is there...
I think everybody is using quality ingredients. I think that decisions at a larger brewery level come down to accounting decisions, and not necessarily like, is this the best product to get to the consumer? So it's definitely a law of scales, and there's things that happen, for instance, using corn versus corn or rice in a beer as an adjunct, a percentage, 30-40% of the beer, that's a much cheaper ingredient. Right. So a lot of the mass-produced beers are done that way, where most craft breweries and that are all malted barley, 100%, other ingredients too, but not anything to cheapen the thing up.
Right.
So you can create sugar and create alcohol from corn just the same way as you can malted barley, but malted barley is more expensive, but it tastes better at the end.
And like myself, I rather pay just a little bit more to get that quality. I mean, do you have that same feeling with the customers that the price doesn't matter, that they're mostly there for the taste and the craft of the...
Absolutely, and that that kind of brings us to like our tap room. It's more of a tasting room. So like I see that our clientele, I see them kind of, they'll have a few of the other beers, but then they'll like, I'm going to really kind of treat myself here, and I'm going to have a craft brew from Oso, and they're going to savor it. They're going to get on their phones. They're going to go on their Untapped app, and they're going to rate the beer. They're going to do those kind of things. I see a lot of that happening kind of in the industry. So it's a real movement to kind of critique these beers, and so then it's what it does. It forces you to make really good beer. Like now you're in a public forum all the time, 100%. Where I don't think Miller cares so much about what people on Untapped think of their beer. Or if you're a craft brewery, you definitely have to.
Right. Because if there's something that somebody doesn't like, that little itch, you can kind of tone something back a little bit and change the whole.
Or if it's something that like people are just going crazy over, now people are seeking it out. So that kind of helps grow the brand too. So places like the breweries use their tap rooms as kind of a tasting ground. So where it's difficult to get all these crazy different beers on tap at other places, this is a chance for people to come and actually sample it, some of the stuff that might be harder to find out in the market. And then when your stuff's packaged and they find it out there, then they're like, yeah, I really liked that when I tried it at the brewery. So
yeah, because just like here, I never seen so many taps on a back wall here before. I mean, you got
40 taps.
40 taps. I mean, that's quite a bit to have on hand. Dispensing that kind of form there. So
we also do, if you notice too, we also do other breweries, other Wisconsin breweries beers, and usually smaller breweries that we relate to, that we get along really well with. Central Waters is on, Point's on, a lot of Pearl Street. There's a lot of good breweries on here right now. There's a collaboration between the Wisconsin Brewers Guild, all gets together once a year and does a collaborative brew. So that's on. So it's kind of a rising tide lifts all ships. I don't look at these other guys as competition. I look at them as someone that's going to push us to be better. We're all relatively making small amounts of beer versus the big guys, so.
Talking about coming together, you had an event not too long ago with the community, and then raising some items for some organizations.
Sure.
Give us a little bit what you do for the community.
Sure, absolutely. So so this last Saturday was our 10-year anniversary, and we pair up with the local Rotary to do a Toys for Tots drive. So this is the 6th year that we've done it. We've raised as much as $15,000 for Toys for Tots at any given year. So that's one nice thing that we can do to give back to the community. We actually shop tonight at Kohl's, and that's another good local business that gives us a discount. Using the Rotary, we get a tax-free card, so the toys get stretched a lot, and then Kohl's cash we're able to use to help other entities throughout the community. And also, and then our brewery tours every Saturday, 2, 3, and 4 o'clock. We just pick a local cause. It's $2 to take the tour, but it all goes to help out a local cause. So there's a lot of people out there that bigger foundations and stuff that get promoted pretty well and do well. But if there's a house fire or a local family, a dad has an accident or something, that's what we really kind of seek out, and that's being very community minded too. So we understand that that in order for the community to accept you and to really get behind you, you've got to do something for them also. They're definitely doing a lot for us. So
So when we come back, we're gonna step into the where all the action is. So stay tuned.
Did you know dragging chains can spark a wildfire?
Only you can prevent wildfires.
Okay, welcome back. Tell us a little bit about your setup here and how and what you do and how it all kind of works here, because I'm sure some people are kind of curious on the process. You know, well, do you just get a funnel and just pour it in there and just pop the top on there? But I think it's more complicated than that.
So it's made here on the brew system. It's a 30-barrel brew system. It makes about 1,000 gallons in a shift. So the wort itself, it's not beer yet. It has to be fermented out. So we're actually taking malted grain and converting the starches to sugars and creating what they call wort. So then you have to cool that wort, and it gets run up into one of these tanks. That's where we add the yeast, and that's where it's fermented. So that process, actual fermentation process, is about a week long of vigorous fermentation. Then there's a little bit of aging time. We crash cool it, move it into one of these other tanks. The whole process is about 2 weeks from the time we make it to the time it's going into one of these carbonation tanks or bright beer tanks. And then from there it gets packaged, gets bottled here, it gets kegged. Okay. So the bottling operation here is the 16-head rotary filler. So I mentioned earlier, it does about 150 cases in an hour. So everything's and then it gets filled, capped, labeled, date coded on the bottle, and then comes out, and it's still hand stuffed. So it's a small operation, 2 guys at the end stuffing bottles and boxes. So with this here, I'm sure you have to monitor the tanks for quality throughout the time from when you started to the end product. So absolutely, each beer has what we call an SPC sheet, which is a statistical process control sheet. So at every time something's measured, every time something is sampled, it's all captured on this SPC sheet. So it carries all the way through, and there's ranges for everything. So there's a control range on everything. Something gets out of range, it's out. We go down the drain with it. So luckily we don't have to do that very often. But it's not just like let the yeast do what it does. Even when we pitch the yeast, it's a prescribed amount of yeast. We measure the yeast in the lab for density, so we know how many pounds of yeast to pitch for different beers. So there's quite a bit to it.
Yeah, it's not like when you're making like the cheap mashed potatoes out of the box where it's too thick. You just add a little bit more water, or you add a little bit more of this to even it out.
Something goes awry.
You can't do that here.
Yeah, something goes awry. It's a dumper.
It's a dumper.
Yeah.
With this whole process, most of it's fully automated, or is it there's user intervention?
Yeah, there's definitely user interface. That this, like the bottling is usually a 6-person, sometimes a 7-person operation to make it go smoothly. So loading in bottles by hand, which is quite the chore. The next place we're going to get rid of that. They'll be loaded off a sheet at a time, a layer at a time. So make life a little bit easier for that person. And at the end, possibly drop packing into cases and sealing them up. A little more automated. We like the hands-on portion of it, but it's more cost that it comes down to. So, but we're still an artisan, handcrafted brewery, so we don't mind stuffing bottles in a box.
So I see you also do kegs here too, huh? The small for tappers.
Yep, absolutely. So we do 6 barrels, half barrels. We do rental kegs. Okay. So that's kind of a newer thing in the market, is rental kegs. It's kind of nice because they manage your flow to kegs for you. So different times of the year when tap beer's more popular, like in the summertime, selling a lot of tap beer, then we can just order up more kegs, and we don't have to have the capital outlay for that. So especially in this time when we're trying to build a building and do all that. So eventually, probably we will own our own kegs, but it's pretty cost effective for us right now. So.
Yeah, because I'm sure it ain't cheap buying those things outright and then renting them out. They're darn expensive. Stainless steel isn't cheap, so
yeah, absolutely. And then they end up getting lost. You end up losing them out in the market. And every time one leaves here, there's a chance it's not coming back.
Right.
So like the keg company kind of takes that on. So
yeah. So talking about storage, because it seems like I know you're really outgrowing what you're doing here, so you got a off-site warehouse that you're holding stuff in for the time being until your new building?
Yeah, so we use it for some overflow for packaging, kegs, different stuff. The big reason, though, I get a lot of people that they'll take the tour and they'll be like, "Where's all your wood casks? You guys do all these sour beers. Where's that?" So that's the main reason we have the warehouse. Is we do all of our sour beers over there. So that'd be something really neat that I'd like to show you.
Yeah, we're gonna right after this here, we're gonna end up going over there, and we're gonna take a look at that before we wrap the show up. So stay tuned.
Yeah, awesome.
Every year, 40% of all food in the U.S. never gets eaten.
40%. That's almost half the food we produce.
Food waste is a serious problem. It impacts all of us.
And it's expensive. Your family is throwing $1,500 a year in the trash.
We're working hard to put food waste on the chopping block.
And you can do the same at home.
Learn how to cook it, store it, and share it.
Just don't waste it.
Go to savethefood.com.
Back. Tell us a little bit where we're at and what's in here.
Yeah, so we're in Stevens Point. We have a warehouse in Stevens Point. Obviously, we try to keep as much of the sour stuff out of the brewery as possible. All the barrels that you see here filled today are all filled with sour beer. So there's probably about 6 different varieties of beers that we blend in at any given time. Mm-hmm. Most of them are in the lighter colored, like golden beers. There's a couple of browns, oat bruins, and some Flanders beers, some sour reds that are mixed in here. But and then Marc and Jeff are just pulling some nails right now. So the way sampling out, just trying to figure out what we got. Like I said, we kind of come in with an idea, what we're looking to do, and then start pulling nails and figuring out a blend that we think will work well with whatever fruit that we're doing. So,
is this always temperature control, or doesn't matter what temperature is at?
You want it warm enough to where the bacteria and organisms will still work. So, if it gets down into the 60s, it gets lower 60s, it gets a little tougher. So the barrels do, we'd like to see it 70-ish, something like that.
When you pack it or put the product into the barrels, how long does it normally sit in a barrel?
It can sit anywhere from 6 months if it's coming along well to we've done some of the beers that sat in the barrels for 3 years. So it depends on how the thing's coming along.
Right. Now, like you said, you pull nails to sample the beer. Did you ever have some that just aren't quite what you expected, and you just gotta say, well, I can't really use this? Right. Or
a lot of times. So with barrel aging, especially with sour beers, if you don't catch them at a certain time, sometimes they go past their point to where you would really, because there's oxygen involved here, right? Mm-hmm. So like it's taking up oxygen as it's sitting there, it's permeating through the wood, and that's one of the things that the artsy side of of doing the sour beer. So sometimes if you don't catch them in time, they get pretty acidic. Right. Or like vinegar. If you think of vinegar, go to vinegar. When they get to that point, like we know that barrel is probably picking up too much oxygen, and we'll retire that barrel.
Yeah.
So each one of these has got their own kind of unique fingerprint.
Right. I know it seems like a lot of work to do, and then wait 3 years, and then you're like, well, you just gotta throw it away. It just seems like an awful lot of work, Yeah. But I mean, I'm sure there's some environments that like you're saying, like the barrel, that it's out of your control just about.
Yep, absolutely. So and we try to. So there's two different barrels at play here today. So we most of the time we try to get the like a spent wine barrel. It's been used for wine multiple times. We call it a neutral barrel. It's either made of French oak or American oak. It's a little larger, 59 gallon. We also do reuse some of our bourbon barrels, spent bourbon barrels, and brandy barrels. But those are heavily charred. Okay. You usually don't get as long a life out of them. These can be emptied and filled multiple times. Like bacteria and the organisms like get in the wood. So the next time we fill it, it's what they call actually a horny barrel, which it's already got the stuff in it. So you put the wort in there and it just kicks off.
Okay. So yeah, I mean, even though that you reuse these over and over again, even though what's already there won't interfere with what you're making.
Right.
So
Right, absolutely. So mostly a home for the bugs. We might give it a shot of a rinse, but that's about it.
Yeah.
So this is truly.
I know, like say if you were making like food or something, and you had something that you always did one thing in there, and then you switched it to something completely different, and you start getting that flavor on there. You don't get that with that.
So if we were using different organisms, like, and we kind of do some of that. Some barrels have certain organisms in them, different than other barrels. At the next facility, we're going to put in a cool ship, which. Cool ship is we take the hot wort, and we showed the brew system. We take that hot wort, instead of cooling it, we run it into the shallow pan, and it sits in a room that's exposed to outside environment. So there's windows that we open up, and we let it cool overnight. And when that happens, is it creates a vacuum in that room, and then microorganisms that are in the air, wild microflora, is settling on the wort and actually gets inoculated into the wort. So which is kind of a cool thing. Now that stuff gets into the barrel. Now you've got some local flavor, that's very unique to this area.
Yeah.
Hard to reproduce,
Right. So with that, then you don't have to worry about, I mean, is there some type of filtering that goes on with that? Like say if there's other stuff that you don't want, is that controlled, or is it just, it just goes in there?
No, it's a perfect chaos.
It's perfect chaos.
It just all goes together. If it doesn't work out, it gets dumped. It's having an idea and a concept and going forward and saying, hey, we think this will work well, and it's blending in with other barrels that are, those organisms are solid. They produce the kind of acids and stuff that you're looking for.
Right.
So,
and with something like this, you really can't get this with the big boys, as you would say, with a type of quality and all this science that goes into this.
No, this is artisan stuff. This takes too long. It's not mass produced.
Right.
So.
And that's why I see that a lot of people enjoy this kind of crafted beer. That you put so much time and effort into it. And actually get to taste it. So it's.
Well, I was saying off camera, that's a pretty cool job to be able to pull nails on a barrel and figure out a blend of beers.
And drink while getting paid, too. So, but I mean...
It's different. I mean, it's a difference between like saying, hey, we're trying to figure this thing out, versus like, hey, we're sitting there having pints of beer. So there's definitely some sampling that goes on.
Quality control.
Yeah, absolutely it is. It's like it's a sensory thing. You've got to have it all.
Right, because sometimes you just can't have a machine do it because
it's not something that you can put up to a machine. Gas chromatograph or something.
Because it's not going to know the flavor, what you're looking for.
It might know the compound, but it's not really like the whole thing all put together. And that's where the human element, you can't take it out of it.
Right. So, well, I think that's all the time we have here. So thank you so much for having us over here. And we'll be right back.
Fast-paced family life in need of a slowdown?
Hello, I'm Dr. Spruce. Did you know all those green shapes on maps are parks and forests? It's true. Visit discovertheforest.org and plan to visit a park or forest near you, instead of just wondering what it would have been like.
While the word forest might make you think of distant lands from far, far away, please note parks and forests are closer than you think, which means things like beautiful scenery, fresh air, and family time are also closer than you think.
Well, that's all the time we have for today. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Day Trip in Wisconsin and a little bit about the history of Oso Brewing and their brewing process. Until next time, we'll see you on the road.